Ever wondered what happens when power slips away? Can anyone truly prepare for the moment when loyal subjects become executioners? Number 6. Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, 1942 to 2011. The desert sun beat down on Libya as Colonel Muammar Gaddafi fled his hometown of Sirte in October 2011. For 42 years, he had ruled Libya with an iron fist, transforming from a young revolutionary who overthrew King Idris in 1969 to a flamboyant dictator known for his eccentric style and brutal suppression of dissent. The Arab Spring that swept through North Africa and the Middle East had finally reached Libya's shores, and Gaddafi found himself fighting for his life. NATO airstrikes had decimated his forces, and rebel fighters were closing in. On October 20th, as Gaddafi attempted to escape in a convoy, NATO warplanes struck the vehicles. Injured but alive, the 69-year-old dictator took refuge in a drainage pipe. The man who once called himself King of Kings of Africa was dragged out, bloodied and dazed. Cell phone footage captured his final moments, beaten, humiliated, and pleading for mercy from the same people he had ruled for decades. "What did I do to you?" he reportedly asked. The exact details remain contested, but what's clear is that Gaddafi died violently at the hands of rebel fighters, bringing a chaotic end to Libya's longest-serving ruler. Gaddafi's golden gun became a trophy for rebels, and his body was displayed in a commercial freezer at a shopping center in Misrata for 4 days as Libyans lined up to see proof that the dictator was truly dead. His death marked the end of an era, but opened a new chapter of instability in Libya that continues to this day. The man who once lived in lavish palaces with gold-plated furniture and traveled with female bodyguards died in a drainage ditch. Before his death, he famously warned, "If the Libyan people don't love me, I don't deserve to live." In the end, many of them ensured he wouldn't. Number 5. Emperor Nicholas II of Russia, 1868 to 1918. The soft-spoken Nicholas II never wanted to be emperor. Born into immense privilege as heir to the Russian throne, he was unprepared for leadership and ill-equipped to handle the revolutionary forces brewing in early 20th century Russia. "I am not prepared to be Tsar," he confessed after his father's death. "I never wanted to become one." Yet fate thrust him into power, and his reluctant rule would end in one of history's most infamous executions. As World War I devastated Russia and economic hardship intensified, the February Revolution of 1917 forced Nicholas to abdicate. Initially kept under house arrest with his family, Nicholas, his wife Alexandra, their 5 children, and a few loyal servants were eventually moved to Yekaterinburg in the Ural Mountains. On the night of July 16, 1918, as civil war raged between the Bolsheviks and White Russian forces, the entire family was awakened and told to dress for a photograph. Led to a basement room, they arranged themselves for what they thought would be a picture. Instead, a firing squad entered. The local Bolshevik commander read a brief statement: "Your relatives have tried to save you. They have failed, and we must now shoot you." Before Nicholas could respond, the shooting began. The former emperor reportedly died instantly from multiple bullet wounds while protecting his son. The execution was chaotic. Some family members survived the initial volley, forcing the killers to use bayonets and pistols at close range. The bodies were then taken to an abandoned mine shaft, disfigured with acid, burned, and buried in unmarked graves. For decades, the location of their remains was a mystery until 1979, when amateur historians discovered them. In 1998, 80 years after their deaths, Nicholas II and his family received a proper burial in St. Petersburg. In 2000, the Russian Orthodox Church canonized them as passion bearers, those who faced death with Christian humility. The man who once ruled 1/6 of the Earth's landmass died in a basement room, and with him ended the 300-year Romanov dynasty. His final diary entry the day before his execution read simply, "We went to bed at 10:30 after playing Bezique with the children. 15 July was a peaceful day." Number 4. Benito Mussolini, 1883 to 1945. The balcony orator who once commanded millions met his end dangling upside down at a Milan gas station. Benito Mussolini rose from humble beginnings to become Italy's Il Duce, the leader, establishing the first fascist regime in Europe and inspiring Hitler's rise in Germany. As Italy's fortunes in World War II deteriorated, Mussolini's once iron grip weakened. In July 1943, the fascist Grand Council voted to remove him from power, and King Victor Emmanuel III had him arrested. In a dramatic twist, German commandos rescued Mussolini, and Hitler installed him as head of the puppet Italian Social Republic in northern Italy. By April 1945, with Allied forces pushing north and the Third Reich collapsing, Mussolini fled Milan with his mistress Clara Petacci, attempting to reach Switzerland. Disguised in a German greatcoat and helmet, he joined a retreating German convoy, but Italian partisans stopped the truck near Lake Como. A partisan fighter recognized Mussolini despite his disguise and captured him. On April 28, 1945, Mussolini and Petacci were executed by firing squad. The partisan commander reportedly announced, "By order of the headquarters of the Corps of Volunteers of Freedom, I am charged with rendering justice to the Italian people." Mussolini allegedly tore open his shirt and demanded they shoot him in the chest. After the execution, their bodies were driven to Milan and dumped in Piazzale Loreto, the same square where fascists had displayed the bodies of 15 executed partisans the previous year. An angry mob gathered, kicking and spitting on the corpses. Mussolini's body was hung upside down from the rafters of a gas station, alongside Petacci and other fascist leaders, becoming one of the war's most iconic and disturbing images. The man who once proclaimed better to live one day as a lion than 100 years as a sheep died attempting to flee in disguise, his body becoming a public spectacle of vengeance. After being on display for days, Mussolini's remains were buried in an unmarked grave before devoted fascists stole his body. The government recovered it and kept it hidden for 11 years before finally allowing burial in his family crypt in 1957, where fascist admirers still leave flowers today. Number 3. Salvador Allende, 1908 to 1973. The September morning in 1973 dawned with the sound of fighter jets over Santiago, Chile. President Salvador Allende, the world's first democratically elected Marxist head of state, arrived at La Monda Presidential Palace to find a military coup underway. The charismatic doctor-turned-politician had navigated 3 tumultuous years in office, implementing socialist reforms while facing fierce opposition and economic challenges intensified by U.S.-backed destabilization efforts. As tanks surrounded the palace and troops approached, Allende refused multiple opportunities to surrender or flee. Instead, he gave a final radio address to the nation: "I have faith in Chile and its destiny. Other men will overcome this dark and bitter moment when treason seeks to prevail." What happened next remains controversial. The official account states that as soldiers stormed the palace after hours of bombing and gunfire, Allende committed suicide using an AK-47 rifle given to him by Fidel Castro, rather than surrender to coup leaders directed by General Augusto Pinochet. His body was found in the Independence Hall, sitting in a chair with massive head wounds. For decades, rumors persisted that Allende had been assassinated. In 2011, his body was exhumed, and forensic experts confirmed the suicide theory. The coup ushered in Pinochet's 17-year dictatorship, during which thousands of Chileans were killed, tortured, or disappeared. Allende's death transformed him into a martyr for the left worldwide. Initially buried in an unmarked grave, he received a state funeral in 1990 after Chile's return to democracy. His final words, broadcast as bombs fell on the palace, remain haunting. "These are my last words, and I am certain that my sacrifice will not be in vain. I am certain that, at the very least, it will be a moral lesson that will punish felony, cowardice, and treason." Unlike many leaders in this article, Allende chose the time and manner of his death rather than face capture or execution. His doctor's bag remained beside his body, a reminder of his original calling to heal rather than to rule. Number 2. Samuel Doe, 1951 to 1990. Few leaders experienced a more gruesome end than Samuel Doe of Liberia. Born to impoverished parents in a remote village, Doe joined the Liberian army as a young man, eventually rising to the rank of Master Sergeant. In 1980, the 28-year-old Doe led a bloody coup that overthrew President William Tolbert Jr., ending 133 years of rule by Americo-Liberians, descendants of freed American slaves. Doe and his fellow coup leaders executed Tolbert and 13 of his officials on a beach, broadcasting the killings on television. The young sergeant became Liberia's first indigenous head of state, initially promising reforms and democracy. However, his rule devolved into ethnic persecution, corruption, and brutality. He won a highly dubious election in 1985 and survived multiple coup attempts, responding with increasingly violent crackdowns. By 1989, Charles Taylor, a former Doe ally, launched a rebellion that spiraled into civil war. As rebels gained ground, Doe remained in the capital Monrovia, protected by his ethnic Kron soldiers. On September 9, 1990, Doe made a fateful decision to visit the headquarters of the ECOMOG peacekeeping force, perhaps seeking evacuation. Instead, his convoy was ambushed by forces loyal to Prince Johnson, a rebel leader who had split from Taylor. Captured alive, Doe was taken to Johnson's base, where what happened next was captured on video that later circulated throughout West Africa. The footage shows Johnson sitting comfortably, drinking beer, while his men tortured the captured president. They cut off Doe's ears as he begged for mercy. The torture continued for hours before Doe finally died from his wounds. His mutilated body was reportedly displayed publicly, and some accounts claim parts were eaten by his captors in rituals of power. Johnson, who later became a senator in post-war Liberia, justified the killing by calling Doe a cruel man who destroyed our country. The brutal execution mirrored the violence Doe himself had unleashed a decade earlier and highlighted the cycle of retribution that would continue to plague Liberia through years of civil war. Doe's rise and fall represent a gruesome parable about power seized through violence. The Master Sergeant who took power through a bloody coup met an even bloodier end, dying just 10 years after his rise to prominence. Number 1. Marie Antoinette, 1755 to 1793. The sound of cartwheels on cobblestones announced her final journey. Marie Antoinette, once the glittering queen of France known for her extravagant lifestyle, sat erect in the tumbrel headed toward the Place de la Révolution. At 37, her hair had turned completely white during her imprisonment following the French Revolution. Born an Austrian archduchess, Marie Antoinette arrived in France at age 14 to marry the future King Louis XVI. Her foreign origins made her an easy target for public resentment as France's economic situation deteriorated in the 1780s. Though she likely never said the infamous "let them eat cake" line attributed to her, she became a symbol of royal excess and indifference. When revolutionaries stormed the Bastille in July 1789, the monarchy's days were numbered. After a failed attempt to flee France in 1791, the royal family was imprisoned. In January 1793, Louis XVI was executed by guillotine. 9 months later, Marie Antoinette faced a show trial before the Revolutionary Tribunal. The proceedings reached a particularly low point when prosecutors accused her of sexually abusing her own son, a charge so outrageous that even hardened revolutionary women in the audience were disgusted. When asked to respond to this accusation, Marie Antoinette replied, "If I have not replied, it is because nature itself refuses to respond to such a charge laid against a mother. I appeal to all mothers present in court." Found guilty of treason and other crimes on October 16, 1793, she was sentenced to immediate execution. That same day, her hands bound behind her back, she was driven through Paris in an open cart. Eyewitnesses reported that despite her ordeal, she maintained remarkable composure. At the scaffold, she accidentally stepped on the executioner's foot and said her last words, "Pardon me, sir, I did not do it on purpose." Moments later, the blade fell, and her severed head was held up to the cheering crowd. Her body was thrown into an unmarked grave in the Madeleine Cemetery. In 1815, after the restoration of the monarchy, her remains were exhumed and given a proper royal burial at the Basilica of Saint Denis alongside her husband. The woman once called the Austrian woman by her detractors died with more dignity than many of her accusers, who would later face the same guillotine during the Reign of Terror. When her son was asked during imprisonment to sign a statement accusing her of sexual abuse, he did so under pressure. After her death, he reportedly stopped speaking entirely. Have we learned anything from these violent transitions of power? Or are we doomed to repeat the cycle of revolution and retribution that turns today's revolutionaries into tomorrow's tyrants?